Politicians, business people, educators, athletes, pundits, experts, geniuses even. We've talked to them all, from Gavin Newsom and John Cox to Todd Marinovich and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I'll look back at 3 years of highlights on this, our farewell edition, right now on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by...
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
All your life, people talk about what's best for you. But to most people, it's just that. Talk. Unless you're with Memorial Care, a healthcare system devoted to one important thing: what's best for you.
Hi, I'm Rick Reiff. They say all good things come to an end, and that includes TV shows. That time has come for Inside OC. After 14 years, we're closing shop, but we're going out with a bang. 2 debates in the battle for Congress: Young Kim versus Gil Cisneros and Harley Ruda versus Dana Rohrabacher. Tune in. So this third to the last show will be the farewell, a look back at highlights from the past 3 years of Inside OC. So let's start with politics. We interviewed all of the top candidates for governor. Here are the 2 finalists, as well as a 2016 presidential candidate.
People don't want to take on the NRA. I'm happy to take them on. I think they are bankrupt in many respects. I'm sick and tired of the gun lobby dominating our political discourse. California, it's interesting, they always point to Chicago, but they never talk about California's gun laws because they've worked at scale and they've saved lives. We're going to save lives with safety for all, and we're going to prove to the sheriffs that it wasn't some mass conspiracy to take guns or the end of the Second Amendment. I support the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms, and know a lot of good people that own guns. I respect that, but common sense is a little bit of background checks to keep out of hands of people that are dangerously mentally ill, people that are dangerous felons. I think that's something that people are going to support, and I think it's a healthy thing.
You know, my views have evolved. I mean, when I made those statements, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were both unalterably opposed to gay marriage, if you recall. You know, it's hard to remember now because these comments I made were 10 years ago.
So you're saying, how have your views evolved?
I have a family member that's come out as gay, and I've understood a little bit more about the lifestyle. I'm still opposed to calling it marriage. I think civil union is you know, and certainly rights between, you know, gay partners, you know, should be the same as they are for married couples. Yeah. You know, I still believe that the word marriage should be a religious term defined as, you know, a man and a woman.
And you're also pro-life.
I am, yeah. and it goes back to my beginnings. You know, my real father walked out on me. He didn't take responsibility. I believe life is something to be protected, and you should take responsibility for it. And
I want to know, how do you feel more broadly about the idea of allowing in Syrian refugees?
I think we should take our share of Syrian refugees. I don't know what that number is, but we are partially responsible for this happening. Can't make this up, and I'm not saying it's purposeful, but Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama supported the opposition in both Syria and Libya. Well, the opposition is aligned with ISIS. So the opposition, we heavily arm the opposition that are on our side. They get beaten, but all those arms end up in ISIS hands. Can't make it up, but this is what happens with our military interventions.
Of course, we've talked to most of Orange County's top politicians too. Here's a sampling.
Or not. I will tell you this. One of the problems that has happened, even in the 20 years, and I've only served in one position, and that is in the Congress for Orange County. One of the things that I have seen is that the left has gotten more left and the right has gotten more right. And the people who are in the middle, the people who actually talk to each other, the people who can cobble together the deals that need to be made to move forward our government are becoming less and less. There used to be 54 blue dog Democrats. Then we went down to 13. Now I think we're at 14 or 15 now. So
$1.5 billion later, 22 years, $1.5 billion in payments after the bankruptcy. What lessons were learned and not learned, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's poetic that 22 years ago I was in this very studio being interviewed on the bankruptcy in December of 1994. So it's kind of special to be here, you know, to have lived long enough to see the bankruptcy debt paid off. You got to pay attention. Read the balance sheet. Read the income statement. Orange County had, as a percentage of revenue, interest income that was so high it made no sense. It made no sense. It wasn't the norm. And no one stepped back and said, this doesn't compute. Let's dig a little deeper. Let's just not rely on one person who's doing reverse or purchase agreements and just trust that everything's fine. And as you recall, I had to get that data. I had to pay for it. I had to wait all, you know, through the public record. So we need to be more transparent. We should have the general ledgers online. We should.
Very good.
Thanks for letting me sneak this.
And you're still fighting those battles 22 years later. Or is there something significant about the fact that you are a woman sheriff of a major county?
You know, I really, after I got selected, that was one of the first questions I got coming out of the boardroom. What does it feel like to be the first sheriff of Orange County? And my comment was, I don't want to be viewed as the first woman sheriff. I want to be viewed as, you know, I was qualified for this position. But I think it's significant. I didn't realize that how significant until I got into the position. And what surprised me is I had men with their daughters. They would come up to me and say, I want my daughters to meet you so that they know they can do anything they want to in their lives. I didn't expect that. I had women of all generations. I really thought that women of prior generation would not see me in the role of sheriff. As you say, people say, well, you don't look like a sheriff. The stereotypical sheriff.
Right.
But I had women of all ages say, you know, and they would tell me about their struggles that they had in their careers, regardless of what it was. And so it is much more important than I thought it was. And I think it gives young women coming up in law enforcement, you know, the belief that yes, they can do it. You know, it's possible.
You know what, actually, Lisa came from the local community, from the city. I came from the tax agency. We think different, but you know what, we don't agree 100%. But most of the time that as a woman, that we understand better. We are more sensitive to the, you know, staff, and we work much close, and then we understand better of those details. So I think we do a better job, don't we?
Yes, Michelle and I work very well together on the Board of Supervisors. And like I said, I think we just bring a different perspective as women. When we take a look at some of the issues relating to the County of Orange, women just have a different perspective than men do about a whole host of things, whether it be the homelessness issue or the animal shelter.
This is where I think there's a problem, is that people have observed me as a supervisor or, you know, out in the world of how I've handled situations in the private. We'll be talking about that. And they assume, because they don't understand me as a prosecutor, that somehow that skill set transfers over to district attorney, when they've never personally observed or interviewed anybody who watched me for almost a decade be a prosecutor. So the fact of the matter is, I have excellent judgment. I'm incredibly fair. I know the difference between right and wrong. And I don't have to cheat to get convictions, but I'll make something clear. The political elite, which Steve Greenhut is speaking for, they don't want me to be district attorney. They're so used to a county where political corruption has been swept under the rug. The district attorney, when he ran 20 years ago, he promised he would not go after political corruption. There's a lot of fat and happy politicians and a lot of fat and happy insiders who don't want somebody really being a prosecutor in this county.
I think we've talked to many business leaders. Here are a few highlights. How did you go from Las Vegas to Wall Street?
Well, as I mentioned before, I was the kind of guy who ended up having to teach himself stuff when he was in grammar school and high school, just because the opportunities for having other people teach me weren't there. And so after teaching myself things about gambling and probability, I realized that now I've made some money from that and from some book royalties. And I had, finally, for the first time in my life, I had some savings. So I made a couple of investments, and they did terribly. So I stopped to think, I said, you know, you're an idiot. You don't know anything about investing. You need to think about this if you don't want to lose your money. So I started educating myself about investing, and I realized as I did that, that much of the stuff I learned in gambling was perfect as training for becoming an investor. In fact, I would say that casino gambling, if you do it the right way, playing at the blackjack tables with a winning system, is a better training ground than anything else I've ever seen for understanding how to be a good investor.
So what are we looking at here?
Then everything changed. And then everything changed. And so there were some bright ideas that said, what if we made a heart valve and we sewed these 3 leaflets into a stainless frame? And then just before the procedure, you would squeeze this frame onto a catheter, and that's simply this. And picture this on a 4-foot-long catheter. And now, with the help of an introducer, you would introduce this into somebody's upper thigh, and it would come up their aorta, around their arch, over the diseased heart valve. This balloon would be inflated. It would go back to its original size and immediately start beating, and you'd have replaced somebody's heart valve without opening their chest, without stopping their heart in under an hour. And that has turned into a reality. Because I believe that having Orange County with a diverse source of jobs, not just focused on the travel industry and entertainment, but one that has a heavy component of high tech and med tech, would be really good for us. And Octane is an organization that pulls together talent and ideas and capital to be able to stimulate that kind of technology growth. And I think that's good for us. I don't think we want to lose it. And it remains to be seen just what happens here in the aftermath of Allergan and Broadcom being acquired. But I'm not pessimistic.
Yeah, it was a moment where I think a lot of the noise that we are hearing right now about what's wrong with our country just totally faded away. And what was right and what is right with our country was right in front of you. 100 of us walked proudly on Ellis Island. I was one of 8 who addressed the crowd.
And here we are, Fareed Zakaria of CNN is walking in ahead of you in this picture we're looking
Absolutely.
at here.
Chairman CEO of PepsiCo, John Kasich was there. So you had a lot of people who really have changed the world there. And when you look at that and you realize that that's what this country is all about, when you stand on that island and realize that 12 million people took their first step on that island in this country, who have really made this country what it is. It was a great moment to remember why we are the greatest nation on earth, and to be able to do it 3 days after Dean and I were on the perch ringing the bell at the New York Exchange when we took the company public, knowing that 31 years before that we came to this country with nothing, and here we are, was very surreal.
Wow.
So what happened was extremely unusual. First of all, we picked up some rumors that Valiant was interested in us. Frankly, I discounted them because Valiant already had junk-rated bonds. They just bought Bausch & Lomb, another famous American name in eye care, some 6 months earlier, for almost $9 billion. And to buy us, even if they offered some stock, you knew that they had to raise an enormous amount of money. So when I spoke to the banking experts, I said, I don't get it, do you? And they said, they shook their heads, said it seems almost impossible. So that's probably why they did this extremely never attempted combination where a strategic company like Valiant, domiciled in Canada, which we'll come back to, teamed up with an activist, Pershing Square, Bill Ackman here in Southern California, we know for his position in Herbalife, where he had a huge short on the stock. And, this is a guy that's very good in the media, public relations, and he is a
multi-billionaire.
Yeah, a very tough guy.
Yeah.
So they jumped me together, and we knew, the first we knew was in fact a call from a reporter asking us to comment on the Valiant bid, and we went the what bid. And half an hour later, Bill Ackman was on CNBC in New York, and then we knew war had started.
Yeah, I was flying an S-71. It's a Sikorsky. It's known in the world of Vietnam warfare as the Jolly Green. It has a ramp that opens up in the back, and you can bring in vehicles and troops. really large helicopter, and I was bringing it back from doing some movie B-roll stuff. And I was in the Sierra Nevadas at about 12,000 feet, and I got into what's called a leeward wind shear, about 110 knots of wind that came over the top of the mountains onto the nose of the helicopter, which created the blades to stall. So I had to put it into auto rotation, except while I was in auto rotation, the trees are 100 to 150 foot tall going up the side of a mountain next to each other, so there was no real place to auto rotate. So I had to auto rotate into the trees, which took out the main rotor blades, and then at the last 110 feet actually slammed into the ground, broke my back and both legs and both arms, dislocated my left shoulder, and pulverized my T10, of which I was paraplegic for about a year and had to learn how to walk again and everything.
Was anybody else? We've had conversations with some of Orange County's leading scholars.
Sure.
So what is going on with this campus unrest?
Well, a lot is going on, but what I'm most concerned about is the threat to free speech, probably the most important value at a university.
And at Chapman, you've sort of made a manifesto on this.
Yeah, we have a manifesto. Other schools like University of Chicago, Princeton, Yale have all adopted a statement that preserves, protects, and defends free speech. And I'm pleased and honored that Chapman is one of those schools.
So I'm gathering Chapman and you do not think a lot about these concerns that students are voicing of microaggression, of having to have safe areas where they are not offended.
Yeah, the point is that a university is all about being offended and having the freedom to say things that might hurt the feelings of people. That's what the search for truth is all about.
Right, but how many times have you actually been there before the Supreme Court?
I've argued 5 times in the United States Supreme Court. 5 times?
Wow, that's a lot.
It's been an amazing experience, and it's really incredible to get to stand before the justices knowing that your argument is part of making the law. It's intimidating, it's exhilarating, it's frustrating because the justices have very little respect for one another's questions. So you get a question from one justice, and before you can say more than a sentence or two, you get a question from another justice on something else. Throughout the argument, we're kind of go back, okay, how can I answer that question that I didn't fully respond to? I think the case that I argued in the Supreme Court that I'm most proud of, I lost. It was a challenge to California's 3 strikes law. My client, Leandro Andrade, had been sentenced to 50 years to life in prison for stealing $150,000 worth of videotapes. He was the first person to come before the Supreme Court on this. In fact, no one in the history of the United States had ever received a life sentence for shoplifting until California's 3 strikes law. I represented him in the Federal Court of Appeals and won, and then the state of California sought and got Supreme Court review, and I lost 5-4. But I'm still proud for having been the advocate in that case.
Why do you think
Now, the biggest challenge we have to the American dream, besides the immigration questions that are being discussed today, is the growing economic inequality. It is massively growing and providing less opportunity for the younger generations to also achieve the economic dimensions of the American dream.
To support the notion that the American dream is alive, though, is the issue of immigration. Look how many people, despite the problems that America has, which are known and well public, still fight to get into the country. I think that there is still something very powerful that attracts people here. And in fact, these people essentially vote with their feet. When they come here, is because despite the issues, despite the complexity, despite the prospects, what they find here is better than what they left.
Okay, so we've talked to athletes and entertainers too. You just recently won the Congressional Medal of Freedom. I believe it was back in November that President Obama, just after the election, had you at the White House. You've won so many honors, received so many things. How did this one feel?
It felt great because it had nothing to do really with my sports career. It had to do with the things I've done away from the game and my activism and writing. So I felt good that it would be viewed in that light, and I would get an award like that. It was very prestigious to me.
Had you met the president before?
I met him several times. I met him when he was a senator.
Oh, really? From Illinois?
Yeah.
Really? Now, how did that come about?
I was in the Senate building, and we were there to speak to Senator Cole from Wisconsin. He was involved with the Milwaukee Bucks. I played for them and everything. And he said, is there anybody here you wanted to meet? I said, geez, you know, I'd like to meet Obama. You know, he's from Illinois. And Illinois and Wisconsin share a border. They knew each other. So he took me by Mr. Obama's office, and I met him then.
Yeah, did you ever think at that point, I think this guy's going to be president someday?
No, I didn't. You know, but I thought that he had really good ideas, and he was really a fresh voice in the Democratic Party. It wasn't the same old stuff, you know.
And I don't want any type of negative stuff that would come out that would not allow me to play pro ball. But obviously things have changed. I'm out now to my family, friends, and media, everybody. And you could tell the big difference because where I work at now in Portland, Oregon, I'm a firefighter paramedic. I work with men the entire time. I'm the only female. They have no problem with it. And, you know, they invite my wife over to banquets and we go over for dinner. So it's a very different time.
So what was the difference this time?
I wish I knew if that were true. I wish I knew that people were telling me these things, and maybe they were and I just wasn't hearing it. That could be the case. But what brought me to this point of willingness was a complete being desperate and a feeling of humiliation at a whole new level. And from that arrest, and then it was the self-loathing and guilt and shame and remorse that comes along with you know, being a substance abuser, because to keep that lifestyle going, I couldn't be honest. And it just ripped me apart living double lives when I was an athlete half the time and then I'm a drug addict the other half the time, and I can't be honest with anybody. I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
What happened back August, just because, you know, everybody read Todd Marinovich is naked in a stranger's yard. How do you wind up in that situation?
Yeah, Rick, good point. A lot of drugs and alcohol will get you there. And I believe that the illness that I have is progressive. And so since I've been not treating it for a long time, I get myself in situations like that, and it's not really a surprise. It's a surprise to the public, maybe, but not to people that have this and are recovering or are recovered. They kind of go, gosh, I hope he finds the solution.
Right. And of course, we've had lively panels.
The tragedy is that for most of the areas where there is this animosity, it's been fueled by this nationwide animosity or villainization, you know, of police. And quite frankly, you talk to the average cop in the street, they haven't beat anybody, they haven't shot anybody. Their biggest goal is just to make the communities they patrol safer. Yet they feel that animosity whenever they step into some neighborhoods. And that's tough to do policing that way.
Charis, do you think that cops are being victimized?
Well, I would say that there is a long-standing, challenging relationship between the police and community members in many communities across the United States. Now with social media, we are seeing the effects of that. So I think there's been a long history of tense police-community relations where policing has been problematic.
That list, most people on these pensions are making less than $50,000 a year.
No, that's not true. That's not true. And that's only true if you take people who work part-time or only for a few years. What's in fact true is the average firefighter can retire at 50 after 30 years, making $250,000. That would, you would have to have $12 million in assets, throwing off interest of about 10% to make anything approaching what these guys can make. Plus, lifetime health care benefits. Firefighters live longer than the average Californian. They live to 84, probably because they can retire early, lift weights, get great health care, and make $250,000. These are people with second and even third homes. They have side businesses while they work. Right. This is not the hard press. We're not talking about people who are working as an administrator or something like that for $40,000 or $50,000 a year. We really are talking about the elite. And these.
As usual, Will Swaim gets the last word. So now it's time for goodbye. Thanks to all the folks you just saw and so many more who we've been privileged to interview. Thanks to our sponsors, 5 Point, Memorial Care, and Chapman University. Without them, no show. Thanks to PBS SoCal, KDOC, and our other media partners. Thanks to my wingman, co-producer, Scott Hayes. And thanks to the team, the pros behind the cameras. Say hi, folks. David Marquez, Billy Trask, Janae Price, and Tiani Teeth. And biggest thanks of all to you, the viewer. Whether it was a word of encouragement or constructive criticism or just tuning in, you're what it's all about. Now, one thing's for sure, Orange County needs more public affairs programming. We're the largest community in the nation that is not its own media market. Now think about that. San Diego is, Palm Springs is, even Eureka, but not Orange County. And with all of the news industry consolidation, Orange County is getting even less coverage from traditional sources. Now there are folks trying to do something about it. I wish them luck. Whatever's next for me, I hope it'll be as much fun as this has been. So let's sign off with Eagles songwriter Jack Temchin. Thank you for watching Inside OC.
With a billion stars all around, I got a peaceful, easy feeling. I know you won't let me down, 'cause I'm already standing on the ground. Well, I found out a long time ago what a woman can do.
Inside OC is brought to you by
each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University is a proud sponsor of Inside OC and community programming.